我是张小龙。
When this man speaks, China's whole internet community listens. WeChat founder and president Allen Zhang spoke at the 2018 WeChat Open Class Pro, the annual conference of China's most influential social media app. He started by challenging the audience to beat his high score in the newly launched mini-game Jump Jump, which is now overwhelmingly popular with WeChat's nearly 1 billion users.
最高分达到了6000多分。
If anyone can top my score of 3,000, I invite him or her to our office to play in front of us. If they do it, they get a special reward.
WeChat has already become a super app, providing services from basic messaging to mobile payment to e-commerce and, of course, gaming. But Zhang says his ultimate goal is to make WeChat the best tool on the internet. Last year, WeChat launched their mini-program function, which can perform app-like tasks without the apps, thus saving device space. Just scan a QR code or search for the app's name to open it in the WeChat. Mini-program director Wu Renjie says there are now over 580,000 mini-program and 170 million daily active users.
Well, a whole ecosystem of services that allow users to do pretty much anything they want without leaving WeChat, which was possible before with official accounts. But now with empowering with mini programs, I think it's taken it one step further and really providing true native app-like experiences for a whole range of things.
WeChat has touched almost every aspect of the online to offline field, from collecting parking tolls to staffless convenience stores. And now it's ready to enter another arena, selling collectibles like toys and fridge magnets. Experts say WeChat has grown far beyond a messaging app in China. The next challenge, expanding overseas.
For more on WeChat's innovations, let's turn to our panel. Joining us in Beijing, we have Andy Mok, who is the founder of Red Pagoda Resources, and once again, Professor Liu Baocheng, Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from the University of International Business and Economics. Welcome back. Joining us from New York in the U.S., we have Ari Zoldan, who is the chairman of the Quantum Media Group. Welcome to you as well. So, we don't want to do advertisement for any specific internet company here in China, but the reason we talk about WeChat is because it's already become a phenomenon. So let's talk about this phenomenon. What exactly is it, Professor Liu, that this has become such a nickname almost to China's all social apps in a way?
Well, it's now, without exaggeration, part of our lifestyle because the recent survey shows over 900 million people, have access to the WeChat, and also WeChat is really helping their life. And interesting enough, that over the 50% of the people spend more than 90 minutes over the WeChat.
Including you, Professor?
Every day.
Including you?
Yeah, I would think so, because there are some interesting articles that I can really download, and there, of course, are some amusing videos you can hardly actually resist.
Right.
Now, particularly now, with the payment, with with all the sharing. So this is really part of our life.
What about for you, Mr. Mok?
Well, I probably use WeChat even more than Professor Liu. And I would say that Allen Zhang, who led the development and launch of WeChat, arguably is having a larger impact on the tech world than Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook. The reason for that is that WeChat is much more than just a messaging app, but it's really the remote control for a person's online and offline lives.
We want to illustrate to our viewers, particularly international viewers, as to how powerful WeChat is already becoming here, at least in the Chinese market. Take a look at some of those numbers that tell us about how important it is to the Chinese.
China has a population of 1.4 billion people, and about 2/3 of this gigantic number, that's 900 million people, are now using WeChat. Over 30% of these users are spending more than 4 hours a day on WeChat. And it's not just simply about communications with people close to the user. The app has marched in and has dominated workplaces as well. In China, 80% of people have used WeChat for dealing with things related to their jobs instead of using email. And it has far more functions than just communication. Users can send and receive money, make purchases, read news, with uses for almost every aspect of one's life.
Well, that is how powerful it has become. How would you compare, Mr. Zoldan, about WeChat to, let's just say, other social apps that are popular in the rest of the world, excluding the Chinese market? The functions, the power of it, the influence and the impact.
Sure. I mean, it's a good question. So, I mean, obviously you're going to compare it to the other 800-pound gorilla, and that's WhatsApp out of the United States. But people right now, from a positioning standpoint and application standpoint, all they use WhatsApp for is just straight messaging, and it's a great messaging platform. But you can't compare any stretch of the imagination from WeChat to WhatsApp. And if you think about the magnitude, 38 billion messages are on that platform every single day.
Right.
WhatsApp, it's a fraction of that. And again, WhatsApp is only used for messaging right now. Obviously, they're going to roll out mobile payments, they're going to roll out newsfeed, but there's going to be a learning curve involved as well for the American market. But going head to head, no question about it. I mean, the dominant player is, without a doubt, and probably for a long time, is going to be WeChat.
But WeChat is existing not without competition, Mr. Mark. Within the Tencent company itself, there is WeChat. There's also their earlier QQ service, which is leading now to another social app that is competing against WeChat internally. Externally, in the other parts of the Chinese market, Alibaba, for example, is trying to create also social platforms. Some of the others, smaller players, doing the same. So actually, there is a possibility that WeChat one day could be taken the place of by somebody else. But so far, it seems quite safe.
Well, that's always possible. But I'd like to make a point, too, because being American, using WeChat in China versus WhatsApp, other apps in the United States, going back to the U.S. is like going back to the Stone Age. Because WeChat is just so much more convenient, lets you do everything that you want to do. Now, to your point that can WeChat be disrupted, it's certainly
Or be
possible.
challenged.
Or be challenged. Well, I think this is something that Tencent and a lot of the other premier tech companies do, is they create their own internal competition. So disrupt yourself before someone else disrupts you.
That's true.
But I think that WeChat is so entrenched and the switching costs are so high that it'd be very difficult to move because it's not just your network, but it's all of your transaction history.
The stronger it gets, the more comprehensive it gets. It will always be the leader of that sector.
It's hard to leave it.
It's hard to compete against it. But having said that, though, Professor Liu, there's an ultimate question. Data security.
That's right.
The more you use one social platform by one company, the more you're likely to expose yourself, all your data, to that company. And who knows what that company will use your data for, to whom, and give it to whom. We do not know. Of course, at this point, it is still very good reputation about Tencent. But there is always the question and always the danger, right? So, Professor Liu, what about the security of personal data? Who is going to protect the personal data? Let's just say on WeChat, and or anything else that could be as big as WeChat. And will the government be responsible for that? Is the government trustworthy? Will the business community be responsible for that? Is the business community trustworthy? Or is there going to be something else going to be responsible for that? Are there something else going to be trustworthy? This is the ultimate question internationally.
That's right. With all information technologies available, everyone is living in a glass house, and everyone is a captive of those businesses.
You could say that, but when you have rules, it is totally different from when you don't have the rules.
Yeah, that's right.
And when you know who have the data, it is totally different from when you do not even know who has the data.
It's not only the individual sovereign government. I think internationally there should be a very consensus treaty and also tough regulations to protect security and privacy. So there's no doubt about that. And also for companies, because the more reliant the consumers or users are getting on you, so you create a sort of fiduciary relationship that you have the right, responsibility. And particularly now, the danger is that when such companies get into a monopoly, they may misuse that. And so therefore, competition is very important.
Mr. Zoldan, this debate is not new to you. You got also a lot of those debates back in the United States about personal data, personal privacy, who's holding it. Is it 1984 or is it something else? So how do you see that debate when we see a wonderful phenomenon of social apps flourishing and providing convenience? How do we see the other side of the story? Are we prepared for the other side of the story?
Sure. Obviously, I think a lot of these companies have to start educating the consumer, and actually it's kind of a double-edged sword, but it would be great for these social networks to actually say, hey, you know, your data is actually vulnerable. And obviously when you have a complicated system, there's always going to be pockets of efficiencies. But if they can go to market and say, yes, listen, the data is vulnerable, but this is how we're going to protect you and protect your data.
Right.
But, you know, there's something out there as well, is that if people are really concerned about their data and identity theft, they don't have to sign on to these social networks. And I always push back about that. If they're really, really concerned about it, you know, don't use a social network if that's a real concern. But I think that there's going to be an education curve involved. But I do like the approach, quite frankly, from a PR perspective that, you know, go ahead, educate the consumer. There's nothing wrong with that. That your data may be hacked, your data is vulnerable. However, this is the way to protect yourself.
But you know, Mr. Zoldan, I just want to, you know, in a way, debate against what you have just said. When you say, well, just leave it if you don't want to have your so-called data violated. The question is, when everybody else is doing it, when you are living in a society, probably that is already becoming one of the only few options. You have to go with the crowd. That is what we do in a human society. The question is not about you ask individual consumers to leave it, but rather how businesses, governments, you know, or other players should make it better for the consumers who are signing up to this, Mr. Zoldan.
For sure. For sure. And quite frankly, I think the social networks, the messaging apps, take this into account when they roll out some of these programs. And obviously, you know, for instance, WhatsApp and WeChat are going to be rolling out gamification, for instance. There's just more data that's going to be pulled down. There's a company out of the U.S. called Puzzle, you know, which is really focused on protecting the data, but they also inform their customers about it, and they inform their clients, you know, which is just good practice. And I think a lot of the companies are going to be focusing on that.
The reason we are talking about it is not just because we want to talk about data security. The reason we talk about it because we are talking about an international business in a global scale. So data is safe or not is going to impact on the result of the business. Having secured the Chinese market, WeChat can now go global. How far can it go? So far, WeChat is only the most common messaging app in China and Bhutan. WhatsApp is the most popular app in 107 countries, including India. Facebook is the second most widespread app, leading in 58 countries, including the United States. Line is the most popular app in Japan and Thailand. So here we see the map. Here we see how the warring states of all the tech companies are competing against one another, and that is exactly why we are talking about competition and we are talking about safety here. Professor Liu.
Yes, I think now the there's more Chinese, at least Chinese people are getting more engaged with the global community, we spread. And so therefore, let's start to push from the commonwealth of the Chinese across the globe in the first place. And then, of course, when Chinese e-commerce is spreading more to every corner of the globe, so that's quite a push forward. And also, they have to use the proper language. I read some of the English versions of the WeChat policy, etc. I do not see much of the professionalism in there, so they need really to shape with more expertise and talents, not only the technical side, but on the cultural and language side.
See, the Chinese consumers are always very critical. A lot of self-criticism already going on here in this market. Having said that, competition globally. How do you sharpen your skills and your edges and make sure, Mr. Mark, that it would be not only in your home turf, but also internationally, you can get through all the tests of politics, economic competition, as well as cultural barriers? That is the question, isn't it?
It is, and I think that's a very, very difficult challenge in this space, because the nature of the product, WhatsApp, Facebook, WeChat, they're very sticky products, so it's hard to get users to switch. Now, when we look then also...
Once they get to the market, it's very hard to switch.
Yes.
And because it is also interactive, you know, if we talk together with WeChat, you know, if I switch to WhatsApp, then what about you? So that's why it's interlinked.
Yeah,
but that's what makes it hard to switch, hard to leave. Yeah. But I think that also the other issue too is. I'll just finish this point. Okay. But the other, I think, issue too is that because there is increasing wariness of China amongst other countries in the world, that's a challenge that WeChat and Tencent also needs to address. So it is going to be an opportunity and a challenge, I think, for WeChat to expand meaningfully outside of China.
And that is different from what Alibaba is facing, in fact, because Alibaba is only e-commerce, and yet WeChat is trying to incorporate all these elements and functions onto one platform. So it is facing a different nature of competition over there. Let's go to Mr. Zoldan. You just please have your words.
Okay, I mean, I would say a host of different things, but I think it's important for Tencent and WeChat not to get comfortable and not to sit on their laurels, you know, thinking that they are too big to fail. Because quite frankly, if you remember AOL messaging app, and if you remember MySpace, you know, nobody initially thought that those two would go away. So I think it's important really for Tencent and WeChat to continue to focus on innovation. And let me just say that on the international side, they've got so much money to be able to crack into the market. I am sure, without a doubt, that WhatsApp is very, very nervous about it. And I do think that China will crack the U.S. market.
Having said that, though, it is not just something about national boundaries. It is much more than that, as all of you gentlemen understand, that innovation only take a few years to have a totally new leap and totally new way of doing things. And of course, you could say you have the data, therefore you have everything. But still, maybe the next wave of innovation can be based on more than just the data. So, Mr. Mark, how do you see that competition, the nature of that kind of competition?
Well, I think not missing these turns is incredibly crucial. In that, you know, the transition from desktop computing to mobile, and now we're moving to this next era of whether that's, say, augmented reality or some other type of technology, that companies can miss that and be left behind. So I think that that is an incredibly important area that I'm sure Tencent is focusing on.
Catch up, always in a team, and hopefully always as a leading position. What about you, Professor Liu?
I think there are two major directions for a breakthrough. One is the artificial intelligence that can really have deep learning so that they can be more friendly to people. And the other is really the cross-sector cooperation.
Final words as well. Mr. Zoldan, you want to say something?
Sure. Well, I'm very, as a New Yorker, I'm very outspoken and I interrupt all the time. So
I am as well.
That's the way, the rule of the game.
I'm a former New Yorker as well.
Final words
exactly.
for you, Mr. Zoldan.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, again, I'm just going to reiterate the same point that it's super, super important for WeChat to be able to focus on the innovation and should be concerned about competition, because although the 800-pound gorilla is there today, may not be there tomorrow. And I'd also say that, you know, we haven't spoken about blockchain technology and cryptocurrency, and right, and our firm does a lot of advisory work in China, in Africa, in India, and understanding macro policy, understanding how it works, I think is critical. So there is an information curve there too.
Thank you, all of you. Ari Zoldan, Liu Baocheng, and Andy Mok. Really appreciate the gentlemen for being with us, helping us understand better, not just about WeChat, but something more than that. That is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us World Insight CGTN into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. Tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.